According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, 170,000 people were apprehended at the southern border in March. That includes the nearly 19,000 migrant children who are still in federal custody. CBS News correspondent Manuel Bojorquez traveled to Guatemala to see what's driving the rising levels of Central American migrants coming to the U.S.
This is Campur, a town in Guatemala's highlands devastated by flooding last fall.
So this was your bedroom?
Beverly Alvarado Cahuec showed us what's left of her home.
No hay nada.
There's nothing.
Todo lo tiramos, todo lo sacamos.
Everything was ruined.
The entire village was underwater for weeks, hit by back-to-back hurricanes, displacing more than 300,000 Guatemalans.
You don't know what you'll do?
I don't know what you do.
As a mom, she says, I'm hopeful that one day my son will be a professional. But the floods destroyed schools and ruined crops. The hit to agriculture took away how most here earn a living.
How many people that you know of have left to the United States?
A lot.
In the last few weeks, how many people have left that you know of?
Yeah.
How many?
Now 6 people.
6 people.
Aquí en Guatemala.
She knows the U.S. border is closed, but people, she says, are still willing to take the chance. So far this fiscal year, more than 60,000 Guatemalans have been apprehended at the southwest border. In Campur, Aurora Chokchuk, a single mother of 3 whose house was gutted, has made the decision to head to the U.S.
¿Qué le diría usted? What would you say to people who think you shouldn't go to the United States?
De la oportunidad de trabajar allá.
An opportunity to work.
That means leaving behind her 3 sons, the youngest only 2.
No lo sé.
I don't know if I'll be able to come back one day and hug them, she says. Her oldest son processing it for the first time.
No quiere hablar. He doesn't have the words.
For now, the words between Beverly, who plans to stay, and Aurora are goodbye.
For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, welcome. It's so heartbreaking to see stories like this, but so many folks are asking what is behind this increased flow of migrants from Central American countries like Guatemala. The answers vary, I understand, but what is it that we are looking at, with respect to 2021, where things stand right now? Why the increased numbers?
Hi, good evening, Elaine. For several weeks now, the vast majority of families and unaccompanied children entering U.S. border custody have been coming from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, the countries that make up Central America's northern triangle. And as you know, for decades, these 3 countries have suffered from political instability, widespread poverty in many areas, including Guatemala's indigenous communities, high rates of crime and domestic abuse, gang violence, and other push factors that prompt families and children to head to the U.S.-Mexico border. And now we have the pandemic and its economic impact, as well as the devastation of these 2 back-to-back powerful hurricanes that hit the region and that people are still recovering from. So there are a lot of push factors that we have to consider. And while a lot of critics of the Biden administration have placed the blame directly on President Biden's rhetoric and immigration policies for this increase in the number of children and families coming, it is important to note that these push factors are very strong and are even stronger now because of the pandemic and these recent natural disasters. And this is reflected in the data. Last month, U.S. border officials apprehended nearly 19,000 unaccompanied children. That is an all-time monthly high, Elaine.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what is the latest on that number of migrant children currently in Border Patrol custody? 19,000, Camilo?
Yeah, so right now, as we speak, there are nearly 19,000 unaccompanied migrant children in federal custody across the board. Most of them, more than 14,000, are in shelters and emergency facilities overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the department that has the responsibility to care for these minors in the long term while it places them with sponsors who are typically family members in the U.S. But there are still more than 14,000 unaccompanied children, Elaine, in these Border Patrol facilities that are unfit to house them. These are stations or tent facilities that are designed for the short-term custody of migrants, mostly for adult men, and they do not have the same accommodations and services as these shelters overseen by HHS. And as we have reported quite extensively, these Border Patrol facilities continue to be severely overcrowded.
Well, 2 court-appointed inspectors found that government facilities holding migrant children along the southern border are, quote, stretched beyond thin. What else did the monitors discover about the capacity at these various sites?
Yes, in this court-mandated report, the independent monitors found severe overcrowding at the Donna Customs and Border Protection Facility in South Texas, as well as other Border Patrol stations in the area. They mentioned that in one facility, Elaine, there were not enough care providers for 500 children under the age of 12. These are children who need special care and services because they're so young. The government refers to them as tender age children. The report also found that medical staff at the facilities were severely overburdened because of the number of children coming in. This facility had more than 3,000 unaccompanied children, and it is supposed to have only 250 migrants under its pandemic era capacity. So it is way past its COVID era capacity, and some of these children are not getting the services that they need because of the overcrowding. The report did acknowledge, which is important to note, Elaine, that the kids have plenty of snacks, diapers, baby formula, and other services. So that is very good. But again, the main issue is the overcrowding, which has continued to be widespread because there are not enough HHS shelter beds for these children.
Well, CBS News was first to report last week that lawyers who toured emergency facilities for migrant children set up by the Biden administration found that children there had limited access to case managers, phone calls, and outside recreation. What more can you tell us, and how is the Department of Health and Human Services responding?
Yeah, so before directly answering that question, I will say, Elaine, that these HHS emergency facilities are much better settings than Border Patrol stations, but that is a low bar because these Border Patrol facilities are not designed for children and most of them are overcrowded. What the lawyers found in these emergency facilities, again, operated by the Department of Health and Human Services, is that children do not have adequate access to case managers who are officials who help place them with sponsors in the U.S., and that they have limited access to phone calls to family and recreation. Children, for example, held at a convention center in Dallas have completely no access to outside recreation. They have access to a basketball court and a soccer field inside the convention centers, but because there's so many kids in that convention center, not all of them get to play every day. So that is a concern for them. They also noted that these kids are not receiving formal education because they are just, for example, getting worksheets and doing arts and crafts, but are not getting any English classes or any classroom-like activities, rather. And so those are concerns for advocates, but obviously they acknowledge the fact that the government is dealing with an unprecedented number of children entering U.S. border custody, and that these emergency facilities are still much better settings than Border Patrol holding stations.
Such a difficult situation. Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.